Global warming is probably the most unprecedented ecological disaster that we could ever face. If we don't all throw in and realize that we have a dog in the fight and start reimagining how to form societies, then I think it's a pretty unnerving thing to think about what the potential consequences of that ultimately are.
I first met Tom Gilbert in June of 2018 when he hired me to help him advertise his farm products. I was inspired when I found out he is so much more than just a compost farmer. I came back to interview him in May of 2019 to help me answer my question: how do we human?
We have a farm operation that follows the carbon cycle in an ecosystem and sort of does its best to mimic ecological principles. So we follow the decomposer cycle for the most part, picking up food scraps from local businesses and in the community, bringing that home, blending that with other materials, foraging hens on that, growing bacteria for them to eat, sort of in reflection of their native feeding strategies. From that, we make compost and worm castings, and then we grow crops on the back end of the system and primarily grow hay, hemp, tomatoes, and salad greens. But I think being a community organizer and trying to support and catalyze a community that feels really connected and has a strong sense of solidarity is sort of this currency for creating really wonderful things and taking care of each other. That is the thing that really inspires me. So the other pieces feel like these components that can shift, but really the point on the horizon for me is vibrant, thriving communities that are in balance and in rhythm with ecosystems. I think what is exciting about compost is that it's the thing that knits the food system back into a cycle, and it's the thing that allows us as growers, but also as community at large, to really genuinely mimic an ecosystem. To me, the opportunity in thinking about food systems is, agriculture was our entry point into the problems that we've created. The minute we opened the door to agriculture and started civilizations that way, we started undermining environmental issues, and we also started separating people between beneficiaries and non-beneficiaries. But it's also then our entry point back into a different relationship with the earth and with each other. So our whole business model and farm model is designed after the flow of energy in an ecosystem. If we want to re-establish food systems, farming systems, community economies that are resilient and regenerative, we don't have any choice but to sort of get with the program and apply ecological principles. We don't get to determine what those principles are, we just have to live by them. That part isn't a choice. It doesn't matter how you vote. You still live on the earth and have to comply with ecological principles. I think my greatest hope in communicating what we do is about building a sense of shared mission around healthy food and healthy communities and healthy soil systems. We're looking for just increased human relationships that focus on those things. think the assumption in capitalism that it then like spreads out in the way we organize by societies is this like the idea that it's a law of nature that we should be competing with each other. And so, I think in theory, before there was capitalism, when people started living in groups, it was because there was mutual benefit. And so we got something from being in a group. But I think through many different iterations that existed way before capitalism coming out of Europe, and the idea of bloodlines, and that some people were inherently like more valuable than other people and deserved the land, and those things inform assumptions about all of our shared right to the benefit of the group. I think it's pretty fair to sort of look back and look around us and say, why are we living as a group? Is it so that a small group of people can take advantage of a whole large group of people? Because, I don't know, that doesn't really seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. Capitalism left alone sees the natural world as something that requires exploitation almost. We need to like tame it and extract it. That separation, right? When you step into a culture, like that relationship often establishes like the base level of contentment in a lot of ways. This whole idea of anxiety and living and feeling lonely, like that's not a ubiquitous thing across the globe. And I don't know that it's entirely unique to our culture, but it's certainly very present in our culture. To me, what's exciting is like the creative part of like, how do we figure out how to leverage our economic interactions to like have it blossom and create this other bigger thing, And just because we're a farm doesn't mean that we can't be tackling issues of domestic violence or that we can't be tackling issues of race. It's like, this is just our platform, and everything else we can, build off of there. And that's the exciting thing to me about like being in community and surrounding myself with talented people, and is that co-creative piece. It's like you can work within the constraints of the existing system to start, manifesting this thing that can grow, and then it kind of builds exponentially. For me, part of the separateness piece is just arriving at the things that we have in common, and the fact that we all want our kids to be safe. We all want to be healthy. I have 2 daughters, and I really hope that they are surrounded by people that are kind and loving and would never think of hurting them. I want them to be safe, and therefore I want them to be in a world where somebody doesn't value them and their life differently than their own child, right? And so it's like, it's these ripples, and we have to be willing to let them connect, because otherwise, if we just care about our kid, then we're like inevitably creating this environment where we're all sharpening our elbows, and we can't actually have our kid have the thing that we want outside of the home in the bigger community, We are all part of like this whole ecological thing, and it's a spider web, and you tap one spot and the whole thing ripples, it isn't that complex to just, we're connected. We just can't avoid that. If we made solving our collective problems less around like policy and the politics of it, and always looking away, not to say that we shouldn't be passing those policies, but those should be expressions of our values and our goals. And we have to do the work as a community to clarify those things. And that seems too aspirational and too fuzzy and too vague, unless you're actually taking responsibility for what the outcomes of your community and your society are. And I think really it's not an overstatement to say that we cannot do it without everyone. And we will do it a whole lot better when we amass all of those talents in one place, and put the collective focus on the same things. And the great thing is if we put a can of soup down between all of us sitting at a table, not one of us understands that whole can of soup. We have to piece the 360-degree view together. I can't do that by myself. And your experiences and your life have informed you differently than my own. And if we can at least agree on the goals and values and put that can of soup between us, then we can start working together to start filling in this picture of like really, what does the label say, you know? Diversity is strength. The depth of diversity in an ecosystem often reflects its resilience. Ecosystems actually are intelligent, they possess intelligence, and it's the cohesion between the different organisms that is the intelligence, you know? And the really awesome thing is that because it's an ecosystem, there is incredible diversity, and there's all these different actors in there that we don't even fully understand that are playing their roles. And they're just playing their roles. Until you actually own your own capacity, you don't give yourself a seat at that table to like show up and be like, oh, actually, like I just filled in a gap and this is what I see over here. But really, like there was nobody else to fill that gap. Whoever you are, whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, a people person, you know, work on your own independent person, like there is a role, and it's all of our jobs to find that, because if we don't all pull on the oars, then we're never getting there. I think we are at actually like a moment right now. I think things like income disparity and genuine social irresponsibility and climate change, like as scary as they are, I think they are fundamentally galvanizing, and I think a lot of people are showing up right now to do meaningful work. This is a collective consciousness issue. There's no like central leadership that's orchestrating anything and telling people what to think and feel about it. Like West Coast, center of this country, East Coast, South America, Europe, like it's everywhere. And it's intrinsic, it's bubbling up from within, you know. I don't know the name of it, but that experiment with clocks, like you can set clocks like up on a slightly different rhythm, like, or like metronomes, right? And if they're connected, like on a wall or on a plank, and they're just a little beat off, give them a couple minutes and they will eventually start syncing up because they're connected in some capacity. And I really genuinely think that human beings are similar. You know, we are rhythmic, you know, we have a beating heart, and we have these pieces that connect us already. Like just like a group of metronomes sitting on board, like we're on that board already. All we have to do is wake up. You know, all we have to do is like tune in and it's gonna start aligning. It's a little less overwhelming actually when you realize like it exists and it's a matter of like the openness to it, you know? I don't think it needs to be complicated, you know? I think these things have actually already been laid out for us. It's just a matter of paying attention, really.